The year was 1912. In the heart of the American Midwest, nestled among rolling cornfields and dirt roads, sat the quiet farming town of Villisca, Iowa. Barely 2,500 people lived there, neighbors who all knew one another by name. They left doors unlocked, waved to each other at church, and lived by the rhythm of the seasons. It was a town where nothing ever happened until June 10th, 1912. The morning the town of Villisca awoke to a nightmare that would never fade. Josiah B. Moore was a well-known businessman, respected, hard-working, the kind of man who sold farm equipment by day and taught Sunday school by weekend. His wife Sarah was gentle, thoughtful, a beloved member of the Presbyterian Church. Together they had 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, happy, healthy, and full of the same small-town innocence that defined Villisca itself. On the warm Sunday evening of June 9th, the Moores hosted a children's program at their church. The pews were packed, neighbors filled the aisles, laughter echoed through the building as the children performed songs and Bible verses they had rehearsed for weeks. Among the crowd were 2 sisters, Lena and Ina Stillinger, who'd asked permission to stay overnight at the Moore house after the service, a last-minute decision that would seal their place in history. The Moores left the church late, walking home under the flicker of gas street lamps. It was nearly 10 p.m. when they returned to their little white house on East 2nd Street, a simple 2-story home with lace curtains and the soft glow of lamplight spilling through the windows. By 11 p.m., every door was locked, every light was out, and every soul inside drifted into the kind of sleep only small towns seemed to know. The next morning, June 10th, 1912, the town stirred to life like any other day. Neighbors swept their porches, the milkman made his rounds, and the train whistles sounded in the distance. But something was wrong on East 2nd Street. The Moore house was unusually quiet. The curtains were still drawn, the animals hadn't been fed, and when a neighbor, Mary Peckham, noticed there was no movement inside, she grew uneasy. She knocked, no answer. She tried the door, locked. So she called Ross Moore, Josiah's brother. He arrived minutes later with a spare key. When he opened the front door, a heavy stillness met him. The house felt different, as if the air itself had changed. He stepped inside. Within moments, Ross hurried back out, his face pale. He ran to the phone, shouting for the town marshal. What he'd seen inside would haunt Villisca forever. Marshal Hank Horton arrived at 8:30 a.m. He entered the house, stepping softly, careful not to disturb anything. Every room was dark, all the curtains drawn tight. Mirrors were covered with sheets. Upstairs in the parents' bedroom lay Josiah and Sarah Moore. Down the hall, the 4 Moore children. And in the guest room downstairs, Lena and Ina Stillinger. 8 people. Every bed occupied, every life taken during the night. The scene was strangely methodical. No valuables missing, no sign of struggle. Every door locked from the inside. The weapon, a blood-stained axe, leaned against the wall near the bedroom. It belonged to Josiah himself. The town marshal stepped outside, removed his hat, and whispered the words that would echo through Iowa for generations. They're all... Within an hour, the news spread like wildfire. By noon, the little house on East 2nd Street was surrounded by townspeople, reporters, and police from neighboring counties. Horses and buggies lined the streets. People wept openly on sidewalks. Villisca, a town that had never known crime beyond a stolen chicken, was now the center of America's most horrifying mystery. The mayor called for outside help. detectives from Des Moines and Kansas City arrived, bringing the latest forensic methods of the early 1900s, fingerprint powder, plaster molds, and cameras the size of trunks. But none of it made sense. There were no fingerprints, no footprints, no forced entry. Whoever had entered the Moore house that night knew what they were doing. They'd likely been inside before. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some whispered that a drifter had come in on the midnight train. Others claimed it was someone from Villisca itself, a man who walked among them every day. Over the next few weeks, investigators chased dozens of leads. A traveling minister named Reverend George Kelly, whose behavior turned erratic after the murders. A local businessman with grudges against Josiah Moore. Even a theory of a serial killer connecting similar axe murders across the Midwest from Kansas to Illinois. Every suspect was questioned, every rumor examined. But the deeper investigators looked, the stranger it became. The killer had covered mirrors, closed blinds, and even placed clothing over the victims' faces. Small details that spoke of ritual, shame, or perhaps an attempt to erase humanity from the scene. No one could explain it, and no one would ever confess. After the murders, Villisca changed overnight. Families stopped leaving doors unlocked. Children slept with lights on. The town that once felt safe now lived in quiet suspicion. Neighbors eyed each other differently. Friendships eroded. Church attendance spiked, but trust fell apart. For months, the crime consumed every conversation, from the local barber to the schoolhouse. Reporters from the Des Moines Register, the Chicago Tribune, and even the New York Times filled the town's small hotels, each trying to capture the story that baffled the nation. Psychics offered to help. Private detectives promised justice, but the mystery held tight. And then, slowly, life moved on. The grass grew again on East 2nd Street. The trains passed through Villisca as they always had, but the shadow never left. In 1917, 5 years later, Reverend George Kelly was charged with the murders after allegedly making suspicious statements while traveling. He confessed once, then recanted, claiming the police had pressured him. His trials drew national attention, but ended with a full acquittal. No one else was ever convicted. Decades passed. Files grew yellow. Witnesses died. Theories multiplied. Was it revenge? A crime of passion? A ritual killing? Or something far more complex? A traveler passing through, never to be seen again? Even modern criminologists who revisit the evidence can't agree. The crime defies patterns. It lacks motive. It feels less like murder and more like madness given form. The Moore home eventually passed through several owners. Some refused to live there. Others claimed to hear faint noises, footsteps upstairs, the sound of distant weeping, doors that opened without reason. By the 1990s, the house was restored to its 1912 condition. The furniture, the wallpaper, even the oil lamps were recreated. It became known as the Villisca Axe Murder House, a historical landmark and a place of reflection. Visitors came from across America: historians, true crime enthusiasts, paranormal investigators, all drawn to the same question: what really happened inside this house? During daylight, it looks ordinary, a simple white farmhouse framed by an open sky. But as night falls, the air seems to change. The house feels heavy, as if burdened by the memories it holds. Tour guides speak softly inside its rooms. The creak of every step reminds you that 8 people once lived and died here. The past isn't visible, but it lingers. More than a century later, the Villisca Axe murders remain one of America's most haunting, unsolved crimes. For true crime historians, it marks a turning point, one of the first cases to expose how vulnerable small-town America really was in the early 1900s. For locals, it's a wound that time never fully closed. In Iowa schools, students still study the case as an example of early forensic failure, how small towns struggled to preserve evidence in the days before modern policing. But for visitors standing in front of that little white house, the lesson feels different. It's not just about crime, it's about fragility, how quickly normal life can collapse into chaos, and how mystery can linger longer than truth. The story has inspired countless documentaries, books, and films, yet none can fully capture the weight of what Villisca lost that summer night. Because this isn't just about who did it. It's about how something so terrible could happen anywhere, even in a place where everyone trusted everyone. Over the years, people have visited the house hoping to feel closer to the truth. Some bring cameras, others bring silence. And though the facts are fixed, 8 people gone, no one punished, the questions remain alive. What kind of person could walk into a home of sleeping children and end their lives without a sound? Why cover mirrors, close curtains, and leave so deliberately? And most of all, how did he vanish, leaving no trace in a town where everyone knew everyone? Maybe that's why the Villisca story still grips us, because it reminds us that evil doesn't always wear a face. Sometimes it's just a shadow that passes through and disappears into the night. 100 years later, the house still stands. The walls, the floors, the narrow staircase, all silent witnesses to something unspeakable. Every creak of the wood feels like an echo of that night. Every gust of Iowa wind sounds like the town still trying to whisper an answer. And though historians have pored over every detail, the mystery refuses to die. Perhaps the truth was buried the moment the killer left that house. Or perhaps it was never meant to be found. So tonight, as you listen to this story, imagine that quiet little town over a century ago, a town where trust was everything and fear was something you only read about in newspapers. Then remember how one night changed it all. 8 people asleep, a door left unlocked, a stranger's footsteps in the dark. The Villisca Axe murders didn't just take lives, they took away America's illusion of safety. Because if it could happen there, it could happen anywhere.